right. Well, I hope you're enjoying the Alden Report as much as I am. I'm having so much fun bringing you cutting-edge information and from entrepreneurs, from thought leaders, from authors all over the world. And I'm really excited to announce something. I'm speaking this September of 2018, at the Future Tech Expo in Dallas, Texas. It's actually September 14th, 15th, and 16th, and I'm speaking there. It's an amazing event. It's one of the biggest blockchain, Bitcoin, and tech expos in the world. People like Tim Draper and Randy Zuckerberg are going to be there, and you can rub elbows with some of the smartest people in this world. September 14th, 15th, and 16th. If you text Bluevase, again, text Bluevase to 555-888, you can be my VIP. I'm going to give you some discounted tickets, but you can also be my VIP. There's an opportunity as well to have dinner with me and my team, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this world of cryptocurrency, of Bitcoin, of blockchain, and the future of technology. Again, text Bluevase to 555-888. If you want to be involved in this world, if you want to grow in this world, if you want to take advantage of the biggest opportunity of your life, then you need to be at events like the Future Tech Expo. Again, text Bluevase to 555-888. I'll see you there. All right. Well, my name is Michael Alden. We are here in Bluevase Studios, and I actually haven't gone on the podcast in a while, but I'm super excited for my next guest. I was actually on his podcast a while ago. His name is Chris DeRose. He's an early adopter or adapter of Bitcoin. He's a software engineer. He's a YouTuber. He's the host of his own podcast and YouTube show called Bitcoin Uncensored. He is really knowledgeable within this world of cryptocurrency, blockchain, more specifically also with Bitcoin. So we're going to have him on today. I'm excited to have him on, and we're going to talk about some of the basics and some of the things that maybe I don't understand, even though I kind of act like I do sometimes, and he'll probably call me out on that as well. But please help me welcome Mr. Chris DeRose. Chris, thanks so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we met a while ago because I asked to come on your podcast, and the first things that when we realized, as far as who I am versus you in this Bitcoin world, is I'm a newbie, right? I'm kind of new to this world, but you've been involved in the world of Bitcoin for a while now. Tell us a little bit about how how you first became indoctrinated into this world of cryptocurrency.
Sure. So back in the days of 2010, 2011-ish, the space was so much different than it is now. Back then, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of fear, and a lot of intrigue. And the demographics were principally nerdy guys who had some experience with programming or Unix, open source, that type of thing. It was a very narrow group. It wasn't as diverse as it is today. And I saw the Bitcoin's initial entrance into the space through a Slashdot post. Slashdot was a online website that catered to this demographic of computer nerds. And when I saw it at first, I was curious by it. I thought it was interesting. I didn't think it would go very far. And it wasn't until Silk Road was announced that I said, whoa, this actually has a use. This is interesting. And then from there, I kind of started down the wormhole, principally with Silk Road at first, and then the greater space as a whole.
So you mentioned Silk Road. So for those who are listening right now who are kind of newbies like me a little bit, Silk Road was a website where pretty much you could buy and sell anything on that website, and it's also featured in the movie Banking on Bitcoin that ultimately was shut down. And but so when you say you're interested in Silk Road, so in its relations to that, what were you buying things on Silk Road? Were you using it or were you just interested in the actual application of Bitcoin for people that were buying stuff on Silk Road?
Yeah, well, so at the time I was buying interesting products that I hadn't seen before. These were early, research chemicals / hallucinogens, club drugs, things like that.
Okay.
And I think there was very much like this Haight-Ashbury feel to the early days in my mind. I don't know that that is reported on as much or characterized as much by modern documentary efforts to look back at the scene. It seems like there's this sort of sinister characterization of Silk Road, but that's not how I remembered it. And yeah, at the time, I wasn't so enamored with the drug culture so much as I was enamored with this hacker rebellion kind of spirit. I think that if we were all being honest, we'd admire it at some level, if only because of these characterizations in movies like Star Wars and such, where there's this sort of honest, noble under faction that's being oppressed. That was kind of the mindset of myself and many others at the time. And at Silk Road, we had this rebellion spirit that was largely harmless up until it all went bad, and which was a big part of the space back in those early days.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting story, and for those for those who weren't there that didn't know about it, like me, and a lot of the mainstream media, you don't hear about that culture that seemed not nefarious. It just seemed like a culture that was just doing something that was a little bit different, and I think of it as like almost off the grid, but really still on the grid, because you're dealing with the internet and things like that. But so on Silk Road in particular, some of the negative stuff that we talked about is things were being bought and sold on that site that traditional credit card processing wouldn't touch, but you could transact using Bitcoin, right? Or because Bitcoin was the first one, so was it only Bitcoin? Was that the only way you could buy anything on Silk Road?
Yeah, absolutely. There were early attempts at Silk Road in the years prior. It's always been kind of this clandestine underground atmosphere of interesting and contraband type materials being sold through the U.S. Postal Service for U.S. dollars. But the problem with the old systems is that the seller would have to communicate their approximate address to the buyer, which made it very hard for those systems to scale. And it wasn't until Bitcoin came around that the seller no longer had risk exposure because of the way that Bitcoin works. And certainly there was never the ability to accept credit cards in these systems because of all of the AML, OFAC, KYC type encumbrances, not to mention the easy and transparent accounting that credit cards had provide.
Right. Yeah. You used a few acronyms there, and we're going to talk about the regulatory space a little bit. But that's kind of what you're getting at is anti-money laundering and know your client, stuff like that. So let me ask you this. Since my only experience with the Silk Road is maybe just reading a couple things and watching that documentary, Banking on Bitcoin. Banking on Bitcoin. So now, when we'll get to now, I know it's still not perfect, but it's fairly simple to transact with cryptocurrency and or Bitcoin. It still has a long way to go, but back then, was it difficult to actually? Did you have to be a coder or someone that had some sort of technical background to transact on Silk Road, or could anybody do it?
Anybody could do it, but it didn't seem like that was the general perception. Certainly, I used Bitcoin on the command line for a very long time, and in those days, I definitely used Bitcoin on the command line. There was a GUI version of Bitcoin, but I wouldn't be surprised if it just wasn't used by many of the people on Silk Road, certainly at first. Now, it should be said that getting Bitcoin back then was not nearly as easy as it is now either. So even independent, perhaps, of the technical frustrations, getting it required some exposure to people in the space or some exposure to local traders in order to get. We had to go through these crazy ways of sending money back around each other then, which involved, I don't even know what they were even at the time or even how to describe them, but like people would leverage these strange money payment schemes where like you'd go into a convenience store and there would be like this phone that's there. It was principally used by immigrants, and then you would call this number and they would give you a code, and then you went to the front of the convenience store and you would pay the person at the desk, and the whole thing had this pretense of like somebody who was paying an electric bill maybe, who didn't have like it was like an illegal resident or something. It was very strange, and that's how it was back then. Now, of course, significantly lower barriers to entry. So
it seemed like, then there was all these different steps and all these things you had to do, and it was almost it was trying to, in a way, it seemed like it was almost trying to keep people out of the market. So a lot of people must have just given up, right? Because if you wanted to buy something, I know I have some friends that similar to you that early on they were buying things there, and it wasn't really for for quote legal reasons, and but they had to go through all these steps. Early on, there's a lot of people just give up on this and say, man, this is such a pain in the ass. Like, do I really need to do all these things?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the principal reason that people gave back then for why this would never work. And it was understandable. It was somebody had to be motivated. And the people on Silk Road were motivated because they were locked out of traditional markets. And what I've come to find as a result of a lot of the Bitcoining that I've done over the years is that where there's a will, there is a way. And unless you have the will, these technologies don't seem to last in the long term. But certainly Bitcoin has as a result of some of these pressures.
So what did you see then? What made you? I mean, I know you had said, okay, well, I see what's going on with Silk Road. Did you, as someone with a technical background, as a software engineer, what really did your head start to really, or look forward and say, wow, I can see this having some sort of mainstream adoption, or what really got you excited about it to say, all right, I'm going to do more than just buy and sell things on Silk Road?
Right. So to be clear, I only bought things. I never actually sold. There's a big difference in liability.
Oh, I thought you were selling body parts. I thought no, that wasn't. That was somebody. I'm sorry. That was somebody else. My bad.
Yeah. So I think that what I realized after having gone through the process, and this is definitely important for people to do. Like, people need to go through the process of buying anything, I think, in this space in order to really get what it is that they're doing, or using these products at the very least. What I realized was that we had, in fact, a form of currency that was non-state driven and worked on the internet. And for me, I thought back to all of the movie plots, things like Blade Runner or Sneakers, or these type of hacker movies where you saw the expansion of specialization in industry in censored places around the world online that was not possible without a shared communication and unit of value communication structure. So when I saw Bitcoin performing that in the darknet in those early stages, it was obvious to me that this would probably or certainly fill the functions that gold had throughout history. And at that point, I started to kind of move forward in a direction that was less contingent on Silk Road and more in the line of what the hell this thing is. And I think for me, what I found, and what almost all your listeners will probably find, is that when you start going into this space, you have these existential crises over what value is and what money is, because you are taught and you are frankly indoctrinated at a young age to trust esoteric symbols and trust metrics that were never really explained to you other than this is what you have to believe. So you look at like the dollar and it's just a piece of paper, but we see it as having been imbued with something greater than just a piece of paper. And in fact, it has, and it has these weird logos on it, and it has these strange memes on it that are normal to us right now because we've never had to question these things. But then when Bitcoin came around, it's just like, well, wait a minute, why does this have value? And why doesn't this? And then why does Bitcoin not have value, or does it have value? And so once you start on that treadmill, you start to get into this very crazy world of seemingly infinite possibilities here in the blockchain space.
Yeah, that's that leads me up to my next question. I'm going to ask you in a second. But before we do that, I just want to tell people who are on. We are on with Chris DeRose. He is the host of Bitcoin Uncensored. He's a software engineer, early adopter of Bitcoin. He's also an author. He's written a bunch of stuff about this space. You can find more information about Chris at chrisderose.com. You can also find him on Twitter. It's at DeRose, DeRose. And also check out his podcast, because I was on his podcast a while ago, but he's got a lot of great information out there. People from all walks of life within this world of not only necessarily Bitcoin, but just in cryptocurrency. And what I find interesting about him is his knowledge. I mean, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And there's a lot of people out there that don't. And Chris and I joked around a few times when I was on his podcast. I'm still kind of learning. I'm still one of those people that are learning, and I'm excited to have him on because his wealth of knowledge is just awesome, because he has really been there from the beginning. So again, we're on with Chris DeRose. Go to chrisderose.com if you want more information about Chris. So that kind of leads me into the question is, okay, so, and I think you almost answered it in a little bit, but I'm going to ask you a little bit more direct. Do we really need Bitcoin? And then expand on I'm going to expand on that is do we really need cryptocurrency as we sit here in today in the world?
Yeah, so need is a funny word there, because the truth is most people by far do not need cryptocurrency and do not need Bitcoin. But what I will say is we have no choice at least in my mind, we have no choice about whether or not we will have Bitcoin. It seems as if Bitcoin and cryptocurrency existed to fill a vacuum of power online that was not present until blockchain was invented. And having lived now in a post-blockchain world, we will see that power vacuum has to be filled by this technology. In the same way that we can't really, we don't need drugs in our society, or we don't need football in our society, or any number of things. But like once this identification has been found in a group or in civilization, it will happen. So in my mind, the question isn't about whether or not we need Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, but where and how it will exist. And I will say there have been a number of places in history where gold has arisen as a need. There certainly is something similar to that happening now in Puerto Rico, where there's a need, and we will see it in other countries. And so I think that as a plan B, Bitcoin certainly and cryptocurrencies certainly have a need to some people, probably or certainly or hopefully not too many in the United States. But in seeing that there is a need elsewhere, we can figure out how and to what degree we can allow this to propagate here. And I think that what you really get into in some of these need-based questions has more to do with, does society need paper money or not? And that's really the biggest issue, because what we have in the crypto space is paper money online. And I don't know that the conversation about whether or not we need these things is as responsible to the issues at hand relative to the question of how will we treat paper money in society. And then incidental to that, we would have the crypto being an extension of that discussion.
Yeah, and so it's great answer. But so do you, like, we talked about the United States, and then we talked about Puerto Rico, which is Commonwealth, but so there are countries in this world, and obviously Venezuela has made waves with their own cryptocurrency that's created all sorts of challenges, but it's also empowering people. So here in the United States, do you, from where you're at and from the people that you know worldwide about this, do you feel as though that the United States, there's still a lot of resistance in the world of Bitcoin because of the fact that as a country we put so much emphasis and so much trust in the dollar, and is that why the United States isn't as big as some of the other countries that are involved with not only Bitcoin but other cryptocurrencies?
Well, I've seen it get to be very accepted in America. Mm-hmm. I remember the time when this whole thing was mired by past attempts, things like Liberty Dollar, Liberty Reserve. There's a few of these e-gold, a few of these projects in the past that went terribly wrong. And so in the early days of Bitcoin, the expectation was that it would never get to the degree of acceptance that we have today, that it would be a rebel movement of sorts, that it would not be as well received. And there's a lot of reasons that I think it's being well received now, not least of which is the regulatory capture that I see happening at the government levels, wherein government officials are themselves part of the space. And I think that's good. I also think that, and I personally miss this comprehension, but gold is clearly part of the mainstream institution now. And I think Bitcoin is just digital gold in a lot of the regulatory sense. Certainly, I think it'll probably progress in that direction. So to the degree that it's being accepted is the degree to which I think society recognizes that the ability to control and understand non-state value is an efficiency in society, that it probably reduces risks on an aggregate basis and provides efficiencies throughout the system. So I think Bitcoin will probably go through the same pacing that assumes that the investment fervor continues at the rate that it's been going. And I would think so. I would think that we probably will have a boom and bust cycle that'll probably define the space for years and years even. But I think that this last bubble really brought a lot of people into the space under the pretense of investment in a gold-like commodity. So I think that that's probably where it fits in America today, is just as an analog to that comprehension that is gold.
Where do you see, like right now, so there's a lot of different technologies that are out there, and we're going to talk about other cryptocurrencies in a little bit, but so what's going on right now in 2018? That's the year we're in, right? in the world of Bitcoin that is going to enhance the use of it and or acceptance of it? Is there some stuff going on now that's really that you see is going to help people become accustomed to it?
Well, Lightning Network is certainly exciting, and Lightning Network, for those that don't know, is a extension to Bitcoin that allows for cheap transactions to occur with the Bitcoin network at high volumes. So that sounds promising. It's a little bit political. There are some who are very skeptical of that technology, and understandably so. It's not a free lunch. But I think that this whole retail acceptance play in Bitcoin is just had problems since the start. I don't see it being ultimately successful because of a lot of reasons. There is certainly a lot of hype behind the message that Bitcoin will replace credit cards. But there's some easy reasons why that won't happen. First and foremost, there's no consumer protection, which some people may be quick to forego, but I don't think they're being reasonable. The consumer protections include things like insurance, where you can cancel transactions, and include even small things like regulatory clearance for businesses that would like to know, for various reasons, that the people that they're dealing with are creditworthy and such. In addition to that, Bitcoin will always be less efficient than credit cards because you have to, number one, be exposed to the volatility of Bitcoin in the time at which the purchase has been made and the time in which the purchase has been converted to dollars. You also have that same risk exposure on the consumer side when they earn money and turn that from dollars to Bitcoin. So there's risk there. The pricing could go up, but it could also go down. And then in addition to that, you have brokerage fees and transaction fees. So you would have some % or two on the transaction on both sides as the dollars converted into Bitcoin and then from Bitcoin back to dollars. So at the end of the day, you're looking at something that should be at least a little bit more expensive than credit cards. And in the case that I'm wrong, in the case that these costs are mitigated, you will nonetheless have to deal with the lobbying efforts on credit card companies, which will lobby the federal government to reduce their overhead and compliance costs in order for them to keep up with Bitcoin, which would happen because the federal government has an interest in keeping American companies in charge of payment processing. And if Bitcoin was getting by without some of those precautions and checks, then it would be reasonable not to require that of incumbents. So even in those cases, I just don't think that Bitcoin at retail is going to make a lot of sense. That doesn't mean that it won't be done, but I think that we will find in commerce uptake by merchants, small merchants, mom and pop kind of things. And they'll probably be highly ideological. They'll probably be kind of weird and shady. There'll probably be reasons why those people either couldn't get a credit card contract or didn't want to. And what'll probably have to happen is if you want to accept Bitcoin, you're going to have to do it at a discount. You're going to have to motivate the seller to want to use and separate themselves from their crypto holdings. And so you're going to have to eat it on your fees. And it may not even be a small amount. You have to get like a 20% discount or something in crypto in order to see that take off, would be my guess.
It's really interesting. As a merchant myself, you and I kind of talked a little bit about this offline about, my business, and that's interesting to hear. So right now, then, do you? I know you gave yourself an out, which is good. I always tell people, give myself an out. Like, if I'm wrong, then this. But so right now, as we see there today, with Bitcoin in particular, do you see Bitcoin really as it's the utility for Bitcoin is just essentially as a store of wealth to replace gold? Is that where it's at right now?
Well, I think you have a few components. Like Bitcoin is in fact functioning as an index of all of the properties of the space. So if you want exposure to financial risk of every 2-bit darknet market, ICO, and like high-end, like Venezuelan money storage systems, et cetera, Bitcoin seems to function in that capacity. There's a very high correlation to the Bitcoin price and all of the other components of the space. So at some level, when you invest in Bitcoin, thus far, it has seemed as if you have purchased largely a loosely correlated index of all of the activity in the crypto space. So there's that comprehension of what the risk is. And then in addition to that, I think that there was this pursuit in times past of having things that you could leave with on short notice, that there was value to that kind of value. So it used to be things like jewelry. You could take $20,000 of jewelry on a plane with you in short notice and nobody would be the wiser. And I think that like that notion of value saved for a rainy day will probably apply to Bitcoin as well. these are monies that you can quickly count on in a plan B scenario. And I think that it functions better than gold in that capacity. So it wouldn't even surprise me if the best way to consider the valuation of Bitcoin is in perhaps what that market looks like. And I think too, you have this concept of like the paper gold market, the paper gold certificate market, which should theoretically map to the interest in investing in the types of value that is portable and fungible value. And I could see Bitcoin taking off the investment side of that space as well. So like you have these like three different comprehensions at work right now. And that's where I really think the value is. It's clearly primarily speculative at this moment and probably will be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And next, I want to talk to you about cryptocurrency, all the other ones, all these other what they call altcoins that all started as a result of Bitcoin. In just a second, folks, we are on with Chris DeRose. He is the host of Bitcoin Uncensored. You can find him on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter at DeRose, DeRose. You can also visit him on his website at chrisderose.com. He's a early adopter of Bitcoin, super knowledgeable. I've learned a lot from him already. He's been in the trenches. He's a software engineer. He's interviewed some of the experts in the world of cryptocurrency. If you want some more information about Chris, I know you do some speaking gigs as well. You can find him at chrisderose.com. So, Chris, other cryptocurrency. So first you had Bitcoin. What was there an actual second? Do we know? So you had Bitcoin. Was there an actual second? Do we know? Do you know that?
A second? What do you mean in terms of
what was the second cryptocurrency that came out?
Litecoin. I think Litecoin gets recognition as being that one. I don't know that it actually is, but it's pretty close to it, if not. So it's Litecoin. Okay,
and so you have Litecoin. Now there are all these other different cryptocurrencies out there, and a lot of them people have heard of them because if you're on Coinbase, you've heard of Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin and Ethereum and Bitcoin, and then you have all these other ones, Monero and Zcash, and they just they continue to pop up. Why? Why do we need others? And really, what's the point?
Right. So at first, I think it was a series. The whole space has been characterized as a series of fortunate accidents or unfortunate accidents, really. The degree to which people think ahead is often zero. And I don't know that with Litecoin, there was a whole lot of thought as to the why we need this. Charlie Lee was the progenitor of Litecoin, and it seemed that in his estimation, this is something that could be done, so why not? And he attempted to, quote unquote, fix some of the problems in Bitcoin. These were minor adjustments to the work algorithm and I think the block time. And he just kind of did it. I don't know that there was any expectation at the time that it would take off to the degree that it had today. I think it was mostly just fun. And it's hard to understand that in the modern context of money-making ventures. But back then, there was this open source spirit that was a little bit more prevalent. And I think it was in that spirit that Litecoin took off. And for many of us, we made fun of it, quite frankly, because it didn't seem like we needed it for any reason. The mantra behind it, seemingly, I don't know if it was ironic or not at the time. It certainly isn't now, but it was the silver to Bitcoin's gold. And that was basically the extent to which the framing had developed. And people played with it. Now, today, I would say the value of Litecoin is probably in merely being close to Bitcoin and having time at its in its momentum and being a playground of sorts for Bitcoin devs. And so what you see now is a lot of the Bitcoin technologies get implemented on Litecoin first and get tested there. So it's something of a buffer system for Bitcoin itself where we gather data and try out ideas. And there's some very impressive people even involved in Litecoin that are doing these types of experiments. Now, it got weirder from there. For me, I think one of the bigger highlights of the early days was Dogecoin. That at the time, I don't know what to think. I thought of it other than it was a funny joke, but the joke became real, as so often is the case in this space. And it brought a lot of people in because people who thought they missed the boat on Bitcoin riches saw in Dogecoin a community that was fun and an opportunity to reboot the system. And this sort of like proletariat bourgeoisie cycle has happened over and over again in the space ever since. In the case of Dogecoin, the community was defined by meme as happy people types who were there to be loving and fun. That contrasted with the Bitcoin battle-hardened libertarians who were there to, basically pirates that'll slice your head off if you pissed them off in the wrong way. And we've seen now a number of communities that are found online or offline even that are then introduced to cryptocurrency and then build a blockchain based around their sense of passion, faith, morality, and culture. And that at this point has defined many of the projects in the space, up until the ICO at least, where a currency indeed measured some degree of values that were shared amongst the people using it, which isn't that different than how the modern era works either. It's just that it's been done by children in the case of blockchain, whereas the modern world has had hundreds of years and adults behind it.
That makes a lot. Yeah. When you think about Dogecoin, you say there was. I mean, it literally was just, from what my understanding, it really was just like a joke, right? They just like, hey, let's just do this thing and see what happens, and then it became a real thing.
Yeah, I wonder what the function of humor is in society sometimes, because in this space, what I've seen is time and time again, something was introduced as a lark under the pretense of play. And when it caught off under that pretense, it became increasingly real and the irony becomes lost. And that hasn't defined every project in the space on the cryptocurrency introduction side, but I'll be damned if time and time again, every extraordinary idea that showed up as a joke and then became real. And there's some like existential statement on the nature of movements wherein the first mover is so completely detached from the people at the very end of the cycle that, yeah, it starts off as a joke and then people believe this point of nonsense. And then I guess for the originators, you always have to ask, well, how much did they believe it was real? And in the case of Dogecoin, it did get a little nefarious. I forgot if it was Jackson Palmer or who, and I forgot the scandal. I guess I shouldn't repeat things that I don't know off the top of my head, but it got a little ugly, and then the whole thing died as a result, where the people who were at the beginning probably knew it was a joke, saw that it became real, and then kind of cashed out on the sort of ignorant people that arrived perhaps thereafter. I don't know if that's the right story to tell, but that's certainly the right story to tell for many other of these currencies in the space. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. So let's get into that a little bit. So what I see right now, what's going on in this world is that with because I'm in it as deep as I can for a newbie. I'm going to embrace that. Chris gave me the moniker of a newbie. There it seems to be every day that there, and it's maybe just because I'm paying attention to it, but the mainstream media picks it up as well, that there are these new scandals or controversies that are arising within not only just Bitcoin but in just cryptocurrency in general. Do you I guess what I'm getting at is am I being hypersensitive to that just because I'm aware of it, and is the greater public really seeing this stuff? And do you think that it really is hurting, or it's just a part of growing pains within the world of cryptocurrency?
Can you just rephrase that?
No, I can't, because I forgot everything I just said. So what? So when we had mentioned, you'd mentioned Dogecoin and how the early adapters, the early creators kind of realized, wow, this is real, and let's just cash out and make money. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the world of cryptocurrency, pump and dump schemes, companies literally disappearing, i.e. recently LightPay, just what everyone was excited about, including me, now they're gone, and hacks and all these different scandals that are going on in the world. And my question, I guess, is, am I being sensitive because I'm in this world and I'm trying to pay attention to it? And is this stuff really hurting cryptocurrency as a whole, or is it just what happens within, any new business?
Right. So a lot of this kind of mirrors what happened in the dot-com boom, which one way to tell that story is in a very similar way to now, which is that day trading was invented. And when day trading was invented, a lot of people got into the dot-com bubble that wouldn't have otherwise gotten in, who probably weren't as specialized as the people who came before them, and the unspecialized people started to take the investments in directions that were just crazy. So there's a bit of a feedback loop that we're seeing back then and now. Again, one of the things that probably needs to be discussed is the ICO movement, which again, that was a joke that became real. The idea started with a post by, I don't remember if it was Joel Dietz or if it was William Mugayar. Certainly William Mugayar popularized it. But this notion of starting a company wherein you would ignore the securities law and the regulations around IPOs, and you instead do a change of the letter P with the letter C and make it an ICO, became popular. And the reason it became popular is because the SEC stopped caring about enforcing securities regulations, seemingly, as soon as you said the word blockchain. And in that environment, what happened is all kinds of new products came out that were very far removed from cryptocurrencies, that resembled businesses. And lacking any sort of regulatory protection, we, again, allowed consumers to invest in some of the craziest schemes that never would have gotten investment from qualified investors. And so, on the one hand, it's terrible for the space because you're going to create a bunch of sore losers who will probably run to the regulators for refunds on their bad investment decisions. But on the other hand, it probably is good for the space because we'll get some regulatory clarity, which we've never had, which will allow us to know with significantly less risk what is deemed permissible in this space and where the lines are to be drawn in terms of what is a legitimate cryptocurrency offering and what is an illegitimate business offering. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is we're finding out where those lines will be drawn. And we have yet to have the sore losers that I suspect we'll have, though that doesn't seem like it's going to be very far away, as a lot of the ICO investors realize that not only did they buy something that was completely vacuous, but also had little to no regulatory protection, and will end up with an IOU from an issuing agent whose name they don't know and whose responsibility is unclear. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, obviously the regulatory bodies are paying attention and getting involved, and I also agree that it will give us clarity, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing long term, because if you know the playing field, then you can work within those rules, and move forward. But one of the things too that I was thinking about, even from our conversation when I was on your podcast. And I think a lot of people don't understand this, especially because, you'd mentioned, early day traders who didn't really know what they were doing. They just got involved. And a lot of people are doing that now, similar to what happened in the .com era. People are just buying stuff and not really knowing. But, when I think about just business in general, and, a lot of people say, well, that ICO was a scam or is a scam because it didn't work or because they ran out of money. And I think, and this is just me speculating, and I don't know if you agree or not, but I think a lot of these ICOs, more than not, just, they might even be undercapitalized. So they raise this money through the ICO process, and then it doesn't work. And then people label them as a scam, which I think hurts, the world of cryptocurrency. They may not have been a scam. It just didn't work, right? I mean, would you agree with that?
So this notion of scam has been a difficult issue for everyone in the space because of so many reasons. I think people come into the crypto space under the impression that there's a very clear demarcation between a scam and a non-scam. And then you stick around for a little while and you realize that if you go by those clear delineation points, almost everything ends up becoming some kind of scam. So I think what happens quickly is you have to relax those standards for scam detection. And ultimately, I think I have come to the belief that almost every venture is a gamble. And this notion of scam may no longer just be useful. Because, you get into whether or not intent matters. Do you have to intend to scam people, or can you accidentally scam people? And you then also have to decide, okay, well, if you intended to do the best thing and it didn't come clear, are you just a bad businessman or an unlucky person? It gets so muddied that the best I can tell you now is that there's a spectrum of scamminess, and we can go into what a lot of the spectrum is defined by. But yeah, I don't know that it's ultimately helpful in the interest of at least capitalism to define scams as anything more than perhaps your own personal feeling about a personal loss. Because as soon as you try to project that into other people's frameworks and rubrics, it gets really messy so fast, seemingly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for people who put money into an ICO that lost it, and makes them feel better that they said, "Oh, well, I was scammed," and when in fact, in all reality, they probably should have just maybe done a little bit more homework, and rather than just like what a lot of people are doing in this world, buying on the hype versus spending a little bit of time and reading the white paper and et cetera, et cetera. So I know you're busy. I know we don't have a lot of time, but you asked me this question when I was on your podcast as well, and I don't really actually know that I know the answer for you. So I know that you are one of the early adopters and really interested in Bitcoin in the beginning. Are there other cryptocurrencies out there that you see as though are promising, that you have a position in, that you feel as though that are worthy, and not on a speculative standpoint, meaning not telling people what to buy, but are there other ones that are out there right now that you say, wow, this is interesting and maybe you should pay attention to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the hot issue that is not being pursued with nearly as much attention as should be is that of governance. And we've seen this cause problems again and again. And I don't see how this decentralized movement can exist absent a system of process that is designed to outlast any individual in these organizations. So when you saw like the ICO, it seemed as if what would happen is someone would basically convert their social capital as a person. They will say, I am whoever. I guess we had Steven Seagal was one of the more recent ones. I am Steven Seagal. And because you trust Steven Seagal, you should buy this token. And people did that. Now, that doesn't seem sustainable to me for a lot of reasons. It seems a little bit absurd, frankly. So I think governance is going to be the reason that things succeed and fail. And in that interest, I've picked Decred as probably or certainly the most interesting governance project. I haven't bought any Decred. I haven't taken any Decred. I just like the system. I may buy some at some point. But if in terms of interest alone, what they're doing seems to be the most interesting Bitcoin fork. And they have a whole history that's really cool. We can get into if you care. But I like them.
Yeah, what are they doing?
Yeah, so the project's interesting. The guys involved created a Bitcoin implementation called BTCD back in like 2013, I want to say, only to realize that probably wouldn't work, even though technically it was well done for reasons that are technical. And there certainly wasn't the ability to make any real money off of it. So what they did was they took the code base, they adjusted it in a few ways, and they've been continuing to maintain it since then. One of the ways that they maintained it was to give I think it's like a 10 or 15% block reward back to the development team out of every mined block. Now, of that money, I believe to date, none has been spent while they work on a process for determining how to spend that money. Or at least very little bit of it has been spent. I don't know. And they've also done a few things such as requiring active voting in order to keep your stake or keep your holding. So if you don't become a member of the community, you lose some of your coin. So that keeps together, in my mind, a group of very passionate, interested people who are informed citizens of this cryptocurrency rather than these sort of fly-by-night guys that are just going to buy something and leave it and who cares. So they become invested as citizens in this Decred system. So I like that a lot. And there's a bunch more to it, but they're not scammy. This notion, at least, of scamminess as it exists in a multi-level marketing sense, I don't see there. And that's good. And I like that.
All right, we're going to have to check them out. I was thinking, I do want to ask you one more question. You mentioned Puerto Rico earlier. I don't know a lot about this, but what's going on in Puerto Rico? You hear it's becoming this utopia cryptocurrency island. Tell us, do you know, can you give us some insight on that? What's going on in Puerto Rico?
Hold on, I want to finish up on the last question. I can't let the opportunity go by without at least mentioning Monero as well. I find Monero to be an exemplary blockchain and cryptocurrency in the field of cryptocurrencies for the single reason that it preserves a fungible unit of value, which I do believe is ultimately one of the big selling points in the space. So that the ability to transact without disclosing your positions to other parties. And then I also like that in Monero, there is a sense of governance in the way that has plagued Bitcoin. And that sense of governance is such that they hard fork regularly and maintain that ability within the dev team. So the dev teams can fire the miners if the miners act up. And that's part of the risk that you're buying with Monero. So I want to throw that in there as well.
All right.
But yeah, moving.
Well, hold on. Now that
Yeah.
you got me going with that a little bit. So you mentioned the term hard fork, and it's because I have a mining operation here, and it's interesting. So what you're saying, so you have, when you talk about centralized versus decentralized, you have these big organizations like Bitmain who create these ASIC miners that can go out and kind of decimate the other just kind of at home miners. In Monero, I'm with you on it. I think it's kind of cool. Is when they do this hard fork, and maybe you can tell us what that means. It essentially keeps, like you said, the miners in check, right? It keeps everybody in check.
Yeah, well, it's to be determined to the degree that we want and where we want checks and balances.
Yeah.
But a hard fork is a protocol independent or protocol breaking change in a blockchain. So when you institute a new set of changes that is incompatible with old clients, you have hard forked. And changing the proof of work algorithm is one major way that you would hard fork a blockchain. Bitcoin has chosen not to go that route for good reasons, frankly. And as such, it let a community build that has really, I guess, what would you really call that if not economies of scale? So there's like an economy of scale that's basically built into the mining market for Bitcoin as a ramification. In Monero, they make no bones about it. They don't want that community to get too consolidated, and so they let you know that the only thing that they're going to support is individual desktop CPUs as opposed to specialized infrastructure. And if you make specialized infrastructure, you can expect that they will probably or certainly break it. So that has kept some level of decentralization in check, preventing the economies of scale. Though it should go noted that the opportunity cost of that decision is that botnets can mine your cryptocurrency. So that may be systemic risk to the system, and we don't really know yet. That's part of the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, we're talking with Chris DeRose. He is the host of Bitcoin Uncensored. He's super knowledgeable about this world. I love having him on. You can learn more information about Chris at chrisderose.com. You can also find him on Twitter at DeRose. I know I was kind of seeming like I was going to let you go a little bit, but I do want to talk a little bit, and we'll end it with this. Is the Puerto Rico, and you hear about these different places in the world. You hear that Binance decided they're going to kind of set up shop in Malta, which is an island off the coast of Italy. And what's going on in Puerto Rico, and why is Puerto Rico seem to be this place that is going to be, or at least ostensibly, it seems to be moving towards this direction of like this cryptocurrency utopia?
Yeah, I was just there. So I travel a lot. I've been to like 3 or 4 countries this year. Then I went there, and what a party. It was a fun time. They were having a Restart Week event while I was there. And then in Restart Week, there was 2 conferences. There was Coin Agenda and Block something. I forgot the other one. And it was kind of wild. There's a perfect storm there in Puerto Rico, quite literally, in that the economy has suffered a huge loss as a result of the recent storm that happened there. And in addition to that, since Puerto Rico is a territory, it's kind of like the Hong Kong of America, I think, they don't have income tax laws the way we have. In fact, they're pretty lax on income tax. So a number of people who have been withdrawing some of their gains in the crypto space have chosen to live there in an effort to explore new ways of living. And it doesn't mean that they won't be paying taxes. It just means that they'll be paying their taxes differently. And so it's cool because there's a bit of a party atmosphere there, but also there is this sense of responsibility. I believe, it certainly would appear, that they want to spend their money on rebuilding Puerto Rico in various ways. And perhaps, it's being characterized by some in the media as being a group of louses that are just there to be bros and party. But the other side of the story, and we'll see how things end up being told, is that you have a group of conscientious citizens who think that they can do better because of blockchain. And in that second route, I was witnessing a number of efforts to rebuild schools and help the homeless and these types of things, that support local artists, et cetera, et cetera. And I will say that you should definitely, if you have the opportunity, go check out Puerto Rico. It's actually a really cheap place to visit. Plane flights are I think it was like $120 for round trip here from Florida, and staying there was $50 a night at a very nice Airbnb. And so for anybody who's considering this lifestyle or just want to check it out, there's plenty of cool stuff to do in San Juan. And I'd highly recommend really seeing on the ground what the excitement is about, because if you get into the right Telegram group, you'll find that events are going on constantly, and it's a mix of charity and blockchain and all kinds of stuff in between.
Yeah, it's definitely a beautiful place. So before I finally let you go, Chris, could you maybe give my viewers and listeners some advice to maybe someone who is not in the world of cryptocurrency, or maybe they're just getting into it? Do you have a best practices or some sort of just general advice, like, hey, if you're going to get into this world, this is what you should do, or this is what you should pay attention to?
Yeah, so people don't realize that like blockchain citizenship is a two-way street. And what happens, I've seen that we have these periods of exuberance that have defined blockchain since the start. And these periods would be 10x, 100x, multiples in value on some esoteric asset. And what's happening there is that a new demographic has been discovered. And that demographic might have been at first conservative libertarian types, and then maybe, let's say, I don't know, Silicon Valley, .com types, and now we have whatever we have here. I don't know if it's like South Korea mixed with European interest, whatever. And what happens is there's a bit of a transfer of balance where old timers do leave, and those old timers have withdrawn a significant amount of their holdings. They've sold it on to you, the newcomer, and you, the newcomer, are happy with at first your initial gains. And then what happens generally is that demographic is tapped. And what you'll find is that people start to lose the faith individually over time. And so we have these initial exuberances followed by long periods of despair. It may not necessarily continue in that direction, but that has been the case thus far. At that point, when it is declining in interest, which you'll probably realize in yourself, and which you probably should consider in the people around you, is that it is now incumbent upon you, the new citizens of blockchain, to make this stuff work. It's not just a one-way street. You have to get involved. And there's annoying ways of doing it where you pester all of your coworkers to buy in. Don't do that. There's other ways of doing it. And things like what you're doing, Michael, here, providing content. Awesome work. I think people need to recognize that if we don't have non-speculative capital entering the space, that this thing will go to zero eventually. Fortunately, there are many places where non-speculative capital are entering, and you should consider ways that you can add more. I think earning money in the space and using cryptocurrencies amongst members for the exchange of goods and services is a very wise move. I think that whatever specialization you have in life right now, if you're like a CAD drafter or you're a shit poster or you're a programmer, if you can and have the ability to find jobs online in crypto and accept crypto and use crypto in settling debts with others, that's the kind of thing that's going to make this thing probably go forward. And the tough news to tell you is that you're probably going to take a discount on your services. But the good news is that if you do take a discount on your services, you may find that value has advantages that you weren't getting in the regular space that you can capitalize as well, and that it's probably only fair. So I don't know if we're heading in that cycle now, but it seems as if the ICO crowd is tapering off a bit, and it seems as if the SEC will be providing some regulations that will be stifling the ICO market, which would probably mean that there will be less capital coming in 2018 than there was in 2017. If so, batten down the hatches. It doesn't mean this thing is dying. It just means we need to find a new equilibrium on your own involvement now that you're here and what you're going to do as a citizen of the space to make this thing really work.
I love it, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on and really giving us this knowledge and knowledge. This is why I love doing the podcast, because I do have guys and gals like you that know more about things than I do. And for me, I joke around, it's like getting my master's or PhD in marketing or business from other people that know it better. So if you want some more information about Chris, and his podcast is awesome. It's called Bitcoin Uncensored. You can find him on YouTube. You can find his website. It's Chris DeRose, and it's DeRose.com. You can also find him on Twitter @DeRose. And also your Telegram group. Can anybody get into this Telegram group, or do you have to have a special password?
We have entrance requirements. It's called the Briar Patch. If you look me up and you look around for it, you'll find it. But I won't plug it here. You got to work for it.
You definitely got to work for it. But he did briefly mention Telegram, and also one other thing I just want to before I let him go, I just want to kind of reiterate what he said is it's not necessarily about making money. That's a great thing, but investing capital in other parts of the world of the blockchain. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about blockchain in particular, but it's not just about currency and trading and making money and things like that. It is that underlying technology, and maybe we'll have Chris come back on and just talk specifically about blockchain. But again, if you want some more information about Chris, and if you want to learn more about the blockchain, you can just, again, go to his website. It's chrisderose.com. Find him on Twitter @DeRose, and also, find his podcast on YouTube. Is your podcast also on iTunes and stuff like that, right?
No, I don't. I like people coming, but I like the right kind of people coming. Yeah. So I don't always promote it as much as other places, because we do try to keep a degree of civility and a degree of even competence. I think in getting into the door, it creates a better standard. I think for me, I have complex attitudes on these things, but I like the idea of action amongst the right types of citizen-minded folks, and so we don't promote it too much, but it's known about. You can get into it. You just gotta look around.
It's definitely there. He's got great content. I was really fortunate enough to meet him. So again, Chris, thanks so much for being. Thank you so much for being my guest. My name is Michael Alden, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, man. That was great.
All right. Well, I hope you're enjoying the Alden Report as much as I am. I'm having so much fun bringing you cutting-edge information and from entrepreneurs, from thought leaders, from authors all over the world. And I'm really excited to announce something. I'm speaking this September of 2018, at the Future Tech Expo in Dallas, Texas. It's actually September 14th, 15th, and 16th, and I'm speaking there. It's an amazing event. It's one of the biggest blockchain, Bitcoin, and tech expos in the world. People like Tim Draper and Randy Zuckerberg are going to be there, and you can rub elbows with some of the smartest people in this world. September 14th, 15th, and 16th. If you text Bluevase, again, text Bluevase to 555-888, you can be my VIP. I'm going to give you some discounted tickets, but you can also be my VIP. There's an opportunity as well to have dinner with me and my team, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this world of cryptocurrency, of Bitcoin, of blockchain, and the future of technology. Again, text Bluevase to 555-888. If you want to be involved in this world, if you want to grow in this world, if you want to take advantage of the biggest opportunity of your life, then you need to be at events like the Future Tech Expo. Again, text Bluevase to 555-888. I'll see you there.